the not deer of Appalachia. My name is Miller. I've lived in the shadows of the Blue Ridge Mountains for all of my 34 years. Out here, in the deep folds of Appalachia, people have a different relationship with the woods. We don't go out after dark without a reason, and if we hear someone calling our name from the tree line, we don't look back. It's not superstition, it's survival. I work as a night shift courier, delivering medical supplies to the small, isolated clinics tucked away in the hollows. It's a lonely job. Hours of driving on roads that are more gravel than asphalt, with nothing but the hum of my old Ford and the occasional country station on the radio to keep me company. You see a lot of wildlife at 3A. Possums, raccoons, and of course, deer. Thousands of them. Their eyes catch your headlights like little glowing embers, frozen in that split second before they bolt back into the brush. You get used to deer. You learn to read their body language, the way their ears twitch, the way they move with a frantic, skittish grace. But 3 weeks ago, on a stretch of Route 58 that winds through the Jefferson National Forest, I saw something that broke every rule of nature I've ever known. The fog was thick that night, a heavy white blanket that clung to the road and muffled the sound of my engine. I was rounding a sharp bend when my headlights caught a shape on the shoulder. I slowed down, my tires crunching on the loose shale. It looked like a buck at first, a large one. Its coat was a matted, sickly gray, and its antlers were massive, asymmetrical, and jagged, like lightning bolts frozen in bone. It was standing perfectly still, facing away from the road, staring into the dense wall of pine trees. "Move on, buddy," I muttered, tapping my horn. The deer didn't bolt. It didn't even flinch. Instead, it began to turn its head. It didn't turn its body. Its torso remained fixed toward the woods, but its neck twisted with a slow, sickening series of wet pops. It turned its head a full 180 degrees until it was staring directly at my windshield. That was the first time I felt the wrongness. A deer's eyes are on the sides of its head, prey eyes, designed to see a wide arc of the horizon. But this thing, its eyes were in the front. They were large, forward-facing orbs, deep and intelligent, reflecting my high beams with a dull, predatory yellow. And they weren't round. They were shaped like human eyes, complete with heavy, sagging lids. My heart didn't just race. It went cold. It was a not deer. I'd heard the stories on Reddit and in the local diners. People talked about creatures that tried to look like deer but couldn't quite get the symmetry right. They said if you see one, you keep driving. You don't stop, and you definitely don't get out of the car. I shifted the truck into gear, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. As I began to pull away, the creature did something that made the hair on my arms stand straight up. It opened its mouth. It didn't bleat or snort. It let out a sound like a woman trying to clear her throat. A dry, raspy cough that ended in a low, vibrating hum. Then it stepped onto the road. It didn't move like a deer. Its joints didn't bend the right way. Its front legs were too long, ending in hooves that looked like they were trying to grow fingers. It moved with a jerky, stop-motion gait, its head still twisted backward, watching me as I accelerated. I watched it in my rearview mirror. As I gained speed, the creature didn't retreat into the fog. It began to run. But it didn't run on all fours. It reared up on its hind legs. Its spine elongated with a sound like dry branches breaking, and it started to sprint behind my truck, its front limbs dangling uselessly at its sides like broken wings. It was keeping pace with me. 40 miles per hour, 50. In the distorted reflection of the mirror, I could see its face, that long, gray snout and those yellow, forward-facing eyes getting closer to my tailgate. I slammed my foot onto the gas pedal. The old Ford's engine roared, a desperate, metallic scream that filled the cabin as I pushed the truck to 60, then 70 miles per hour. On these winding Appalachian back roads, 70 is a death wish. The tires screamed as I took a sharp turn, the back end of the truck fishtailing dangerously close to the steep drop-off of the ravine. I looked in the rearview mirror, praying to see nothing but the receding white wall of fog, but it was there. The creature, the not deer, was still behind me. It hadn't just kept pace, it was closing the gap. It was still running on its hind legs, its body tilted forward at an impossible angle, its front hooves clicking against the asphalt with a sound like a hail of hammers. Every time it hit a patch of moonlight, I could see the way its skin moved. It didn't look like fur. It looked like gray, bruised leather stretched too tightly over a frame of mismatched bones. The most terrifying part wasn't the speed. It was the stability. Its head remained perfectly level. Those yellow, human-like eyes fixed on my mirror, never blinking, never wavering. It wasn't panting. It wasn't struggling. It was hunting. Go, 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 I hissed, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I reached a straight stretch of road and floored it. The speedometer climbed to 80. My headlights cut through the mist, illuminating the dark trunks of the ancient pines that lined the road like spectators at a funeral. I thought I could outrun it. No animal, no matter how mutated, should be able to keep up with a V8 engine on a straightaway. But then I heard a sound that made my stomach drop. Thump. Something hit the roof of the cab. The entire truck shuddered. The metal above my head buckled inward, a shallow indentation appearing right where the dome light sat. I looked up, paralyzed with fear. A long, thin limb, gray and hairless, curled over the edge of the windshield. It didn't have a hoof. It had 3 elongated fingers, tipped with dark, jagged nails that scratched against the glass with a screech that set my teeth on edge. The creature hadn't stayed behind me, it had jumped. The weight on the roof shifted. I could hear the rhythmic click, click, click of its nails on the metal. Then, A face appeared. It was upside down, hanging over the top of the windshield. Those yellow eyes looked directly into mine through the glass. Up close, I could see the fine cracks in its snout and the way its nostrils flared, exhaling a hot, wet breath that fogged up the exterior of the window. It smelled like cedar and old, copper-tasting blood. I swerved hard, trying to throw it off. The truck lurched to the left, the tires kicking up a cloud of gravel and dead leaves. I heard a wet, sliding sound on the roof, and for a second, the face vanished. I didn't wait. I reached into the glove box and pulled out my heavy-duty tire iron. It was the only weapon I had. The radio, which had been playing static for the last hour, suddenly burst into life. It wasn't music. It was a voice. My voice, Miller. Why are you driving so fast? The words were distorted, clipped, as if they had been recorded and spliced back together in the wrong order. It was the same mimicry I'd heard about in the hollows, but hearing it coming from my own dashboard, in my own voice, made me want to vomit. Stop the car, Miller. I found a shortcut. The creature slammed its head against the windshield. The glass didn't shatter, but a spiderweb of cracks erupted from the point of impact. It hit it again, and again. Crack, crack. I realized then that it wasn't trying to break in, it was trying to get me to look away from the road. I looked back at the path ahead just in time to see a massive fallen oak tree blocking both lanes. I didn't have time to brake. I yanked the wheel to the right, aiming for the narrow gap between the trunk and the steep hillside. The truck hit the ditch with a bone-jarring impact. The world spun green, black, and white as the Ford rolled once, twice, before coming to a rest on its side against a thicket of mountain laurel. Silence rushed in. The engine had stalled. The headlights were smashed. The only light came from the dim, flickering glow of the dashboard. I was hanging by my seatbelt, my head throbbing, the taste of iron in my mouth. I looked up through the shattered side window. The knot deer was standing in the road, bathed in the pale moonlight. It had landed on its feet, its long, gray body unfolding from its crouch. It didn't rush me. It just stood there, tilting its head to the side, watching the wrecked truck with that same terrible curiosity. Then it began to change. Its spine began to crack and pop, shifting beneath the gray skin. The antlers began to recede into its skull, and the snout started to flatten. It was trying to match the shape of the man it was looking at. It was trying to become me. The silence following the crash was worse than the noise of the impact. It was a thick, ringing silence that felt like it was pressing into my eardrums. I was suspended in the air, held only by the tension of my seatbelt, while the smell of gasoline and hot coolant filled the overturned cabin. Outside, the fog had settled back over the wreck, swirling through the shattered windshield like ghosts looking for a place to rest. I fumbled with the seatbelt release, my fingers feeling like they were made of wood. My left arm was numb, and I could feel a hot trickle of blood running down my neck, soaking into my collar. With a sharp click, the belt gave way, and I fell hard against the passenger door, my shoulder screaming in protest. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just listened. From somewhere outside, near the rear of the truck, I heard it. Squelch. Crack. Squelch. It was the sound of something wet and heavy moving through the dead leaves. But there was another sound beneath it, a rhythmic snapping, like someone breaking dry kindling over their knee. I looked through the broken side window. The creature was 10 feet away, standing in a patch of moonlight. Its transformation wasn't a clean, magical shift. It was a violent, mechanical restructuring of flesh and bone. Its gray, leathery skin was rippling, bubbling like boiling tar as the skeletal structure beneath it shifted to match mine. The long, distorted neck was shrinking, the vertebrae grinding against each other with a sound that made my teeth ache. The most horrifying part was the face. The long, deer-like snout was collapsing inward, the flesh folding back on itself to form a crude, lumpy approximation of a human jaw. The yellow eyes were moving, migrating toward the center of its head. One eye was still higher than the other, and the ears were still pointed and tufted with gray hair, but the resemblance was starting to show. It was molding itself into a clay version of me. Miller, help me. The voice came from the creature's half-formed mouth. It wasn't through the radio anymore. It was raw, wet, and bubbling, as if the words were being forced through a throat filled with mud. It used my exact inflection, the slight Appalachian drawl I'd spent years trying to hide. I'm hurt. Miller, please, open the door. I gripped the tire iron so hard my knuckles bled. I knew that if I stayed in the truck, I was a cornered rat. I had to get to the tree line. The forest was dense here, filled with rhododendron thickets and limestone crevices. If I could make it to the hollow, I might have a chance to lose it in the dark. I kicked the shattered windshield with both feet. The safety glass groaned and gave way, falling outward in a shimmering sheet. I scrambled out, dragging my injured arm behind me, and hit the wet earth. The cold air hit my face like a slap, clearing the fog in my brain for a split second. I didn't look back. I dived into the thicket, the mountain laurel scratching at my face and tearing at my jacket. I moved as quietly as I could, but in the Appalachian woods at night, every step sounds like a gunshot. Crunch, crack, snap. Behind me, the clicking sound stopped. Where are you going? Miller? The voice was closer now. Much closer. I turned my head just enough to see a shadow moving through the mist. It wasn't running on its hind legs anymore. It was moving on all fours, but not like a deer. It was moving like a man on his hands and knees, its limbs elongated and its joints bending in ways that made it look like a massive pale spider. I reached a small limestone ledge, a drop-off common in these mountains. Below was a shallow creek, the water rushing over the stones with a steady, rhythmic hum. I slid down the embankment, the mud coating my clothes, and tucked myself into a small crevice beneath the ledge. I held my breath. I pressed my face into the cold, wet stone, praying that the scent of the mud and the rushing water would mask the smell of my fear. Then, the scuttling sound reached the top of the ledge directly above me. I could see its hands, those gray three-fingered things gripping the edge of the rock just inches from my head. The nails were caked with the red clay of the road. I could hear its breathing heavy, wet, and irregular. And then the creature began to sing. It wasn't a song I knew. It was a lullaby my mother used to hum to me when I was 5 years old, a tune I hadn't thought about in 30 years. It hummed the melody perfectly with the same soft, comforting vibration. It wasn't just taking my face and my voice. It was digging into the echoes of my life. It was looking for the parts of me that would make me stop running. It was looking for the routine of my heart. Sleep. Baby, sleep. It hummed, the sound vibrating through the limestone and into my very bones. I closed my eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on my cheek. I knew I couldn't stay here. If I stayed, I would eventually answer it. I would eventually step out of the shadows and into its embrace. I looked at the tire iron in my hand. It was cold, heavy, and real. It was a piece of the world that didn't change, no matter what the woods tried to tell me. I waited for the humming to reach the final note. I waited for the creature to lean its head over the ledge to look for me. And as the gray, half-human face peered into the crevice, its yellow eyes searching the dark, I didn't scream, I didn't pray. I swung. The heavy iron bar connected with a sickening hollow thud. It didn't sound like hitting a skull. It sounded like striking a bag of wet sand. The creature didn't cry out. It didn't even recoil. Its head just snapped to the side at an impossible angle, the neck spinning loosely like a broken swivel. But those yellow eyes, those terrible forward-facing eyes, remained fixed on mine. The creature's mouth, now a jagged, lipless slit, widened into a grin that revealed rows of needle-thin teeth that no deer should ever possess. It reached out with one of those elongated, gray hands and gripped the tire iron. The strength was immense. I felt the vibration of the metal as it began to bend under the creature's grip. Bad boy Miller, it whispered, the voice now a perfect, terrifying blend of my mother's sweetness and my own adult rasp. You always were too stubborn. I let go of the iron. I didn't have a choice. I scrambled backward, deeper into the crevice, as the creature began to pull itself down the ledge. It moved with a sickening liquid grace, its bones popping and snapping as it forced its oversized frame into the narrow space. The smell was overwhelming now, the scent of a 1,000-year-old grave that had just been opened to the damp Appalachian air. I found a small, narrow chimney in the rock behind me, a vertical crack that led upward toward the surface. I jammed my body into it, my heart hammering against the stone. I climbed with a desperation I didn't know I possessed. My fingernails tearing against the limestone, my boots slipping on the wet moss. Behind me, the scuttling sound grew louder. The creature was right there. I could feel its hot, wet breath on the soles of my feet. I could hear the sound of its nails raking against the rock, searching for a grip. Come back, Miller. We are almost the same now. I burst through the top of the chimney and found myself back on the forest floor, a few hundred yards from the wreck of my truck. The fog was so thick I could barely see 5 feet in front of me. I ran. I didn't look for a path. I didn't look for the road. I just ran toward the sound of the creek, hoping the rushing water would drown out the sound of my own footsteps. I ran until my lungs felt like they were filled with burning oil. I ran until the trees began to thin and I saw the distant flickering lights of a 24-hour gas station on the edge of the forest. I didn't stop until I reached the asphalt. I didn't stop until I saw the fluorescent glow of the store windows and the sight of a bored clerk behind the counter. I collapsed against the glass, my chest heaving, my clothes torn and covered in red clay. The clerk looked up, his eyes widening in alarm. "Hey, man, you okay? What happened to you?" I tried to speak. I tried to tell him about the truck, about the creature, about the thing that was trying to wear my face. But when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. My throat felt like it was filled with dry, gray dust. I looked at my hands. They were pale, unnaturally pale. My fingernails were dark, almost black, and they felt harder than they should be. The clerk stepped around the counter, reaching for his phone. "Hold on, buddy. I'm calling the deputies. You look like you've been through a meat grinder." He looked at me, really looked at me, and his expression shifted from concern to something else. Something like confusion. Then, something like pure, unadulterated terror. "Wait a minute," he whispered, backing away. Your eyes." I didn't stay to find out what he saw. I turned and ran back into the night, but I didn't go back to the woods. I found a stolen car in the parking lot with the keys still in the ignition. I drove until the sun came up, and then I kept driving until I reached the coast. I live in a small town in South Carolina now. I work as a night janitor in a shopping mall. It's a job of routine. I clean the floors, I empty the bins, and I never, ever speak to anyone. People think I'm just a quiet, broken man. They don't know why I always wear long sleeves, even in the blistering heat of a Carolina summer. They don't know why I keep all the mirrors in my apartment covered with thick black cloth. And they don't know why every time I see a deer on the side of the road, I don't feel fear. I feel a strange pulsing hunger. Because sometimes when I'm alone in the basement of the mall and the world is quiet, I find myself humming a lullaby. And when I look down at the floor, I just mopped. I don't see my own reflection anymore. I see a pair of yellow, forward-facing eyes waiting for me to finish the transformation. I'm still Miller, I think, but every morning, the routine gets a little harder to remember, and every night, the whistling in the distance gets a little louder. I survived the not deer, but I'm starting to realize that the woods didn't want my life. They wanted my echo. And now, the echo is the only thing that's left.